The rain fell in thin silver needles, hissing off the cracked black top of a forgotten service road just outside Cedar Bluff, Kentucky. The rust-red pickup truck rumbled along at barely 30, and the wipers screeched as they tried to keep up with the rain. Eli Harper, a 33-year-old mechanic, was behind the wheel. His life had settled into a quiet routine of grease, coffee, and bills that were past due. Eli was on his way home from the store when he saw something that caught his eye, a pile of old furniture that had been thrown away at the edge of a drainage ditch. There wasn't a regular trash pickup on the back roads of Cedar Bluff, so it wasn't uncommon to see old mattresses or broken cabinets left to rot. But this pile was not like the others. He tapped the brakes when he saw a flicker of movement, a tremor through the rain. He almost kept going. Not quite. Probably raccoons, he said quietly, but a knot of worry grew in his chest. Eli parked the truck on the gravel shoulder and reached under the passenger seat to get the flashlight that was making noise. As he trudged toward the pile of trash, the rain soaked him right away. There was an old carpet that was half rolled up on top of broken plywood. There was a whimpering sound coming from underneath it. It was high, like a bird's cry, but wetter and weaker. He got down on one knee and pulled up the rug. What he saw took the breath out of him. Two little things, no bigger than house cats, were shivering in a nest of wrapped-up trash bags. Their bodies were smooth but strangely shaped, and where the light hit them, they shone emerald and bronze. Each had a narrow snout, wings that were see-through and folded tightly against their sides, and eyes that looked like molten gold. One hissed weakly and curled around the other when the flashlight beam hit them. Eli blinked as the rain hit his face. Not a chance. No way, man. He had seen lizards, snakes, and even the odd iguana that had gotten away. But these weren't any reptiles he knew. Their wings twitched again, and it was clear they were bats. Hey, little guys, he said quietly as he bent down. The rain made it hard to hear his voice. Who did this to you? He thought the smaller creature was the younger one because it made another soft squeal. He saw a piece of cheap twine round their little ankles, as if someone had tied them together and thrown them away. Ellie's stomach turned. Someone wanted them to die out here. Taking them home, he carefully picked them up, surprised by how warm they were. Their scales felt smooth, like polished stone, when he touched them with his rough hands. One shook, and the other weakly flapped its wet wings. He put them in his jacket and ran back to the truck. His mind was racing by the time he slammed the door and turned up the heat. Control of animals, the cops, and what would he even say? Hey, I just found a couple of baby dragons. Sure, that would work. He decided on the only thing that made sense. Keep them warm and safe. He was already calling the creatures babies in his mind as they snuggled against his chest while he drove. He felt a faint spark of heat against his ribs every now and then, like a tiny coal ember. Eli laid them on an old fleece blanket near the wood stove in his small, one-story house behind the garage he rented. The bigger one blinked at him, and its pupils got smaller. There was a faint puff of steam coming out of its nose. Yeah, he said softly, bending down to their level. You don't look like iguanas, do you? He looked through the fridge for warm water, a shallow dish of milk, and scraps of chicken. They sniffed the food but didn't move much. Instead, they pressed against each other with their eyes half closed, as if they were too tired to move. Questions. At midnight, Eli sat in a creaking chair and stared for a long time after the rain stopped. Questions kept coming. Where did they come from? Are there any more? Is someone looking for them or missing them? The bigger one moved round to him. It stood up, its wings shaking, and made a little chirp that sounded like embers crackling. Eli put out a hand. It didn't back down. Instead, it nudged his palm, and the warmth of its breath shocked him. Okay, he said, smiling even though it was silly. You have a lot of courage. The smaller one came next, clumsily but with purpose. They both snuggled up in his lap. Eli felt a strange calm wash over him, and before he could change his mind, a quiet promise formed. He said, "I've got you. Nobody is going to throw you away again." Giving a name to the impossible, he had decided by sunrise that they needed names. The one with the boulder, bronze-streaked scales, became Ash because it smelled faintly smoky. He named his shy, green sibling Willow after the trees that bent gracefully outside his store. Eli turned his spare room into a makeshift home over the next week, adding heat lamps, climbing perches, and shallow water tubs. He saw that they ate scrambled eggs and raw fish, and that their little chests glowed softly when they purred. He also learned that they weren't really pets. He woke up with a jolt on the third night. He ran in to see a burn mark on the wall and Ash blinking innocently, with a thin ribbon of smoke coming out of its nose. "Great," Eli said, sounding both scared and amazed. "You breathe fire?" "Of course you do." Whispers in the dark in a small town. News spread quickly. Neighbors saw the people go into the hardware store late at night and heard strange chirping sounds coming from open windows. One night, Ellie's friend Marla came over and her eyes narrowed when she smelled the faint sulfur. She teased, "Are you hiding something?" "Just a project," Eli said, putting on a smile. He trusted Marla because she ran the diner and had known him since high school, but the stakes were higher than any friendship. Eli knew that if word got out, someone would take Ash and Willow. He wasn't going to let it happen. No matter who they were, the government, scientists, or poachers. And for 17 years, he kept it a secret. It had been 17 summers in Kentucky since Eli Harper found two impossible creatures shivering in the rain. He was 50 now, with silver streaks in his dark hair. His shoulders were still broad and his eyes were steady, the look of a man who had done more than just keep engines running all these years. He had grown up with Ash and Willow. They weren't the tiny babies he used to hold against his chest. Ash was on all fours and almost chest high. His wingspan was bigger than Ellie's pickup truck. Bronze scales shone in the sun like hammered copper. Willow stayed a little smaller, and when the moonlight hit the emerald hide, it sparkled with soft blues. With one strong beat, both could fly into the air, their bodies turning into streaks of fire and wind. People who weren't there thought they were just rumors. People in the area talked about weird hawks flying over the ridge or lights flashing in the night sky that they couldn't explain. Eli never said yes or no. He no longer doubted what the dragons were, so they had become his family and his purpose. The valley that is hidden Eli bought 30 wooded acres and a rocky hollow with a spring-fed pond a few years after he found them. There, he built a shelter that looked like a hangar and was hidden by a canopy of pines. The dragons could fly, hunt, and hide without being noticed too much. He had gotten used to their rhythms. They liked to fly above the hills at dawn, catching thermals until the first light painted their wings. They spent their afternoons lying on the warm limestone outcrops while Eli worked on engines in a barn that had been turned into a workshop. Some nights, when the air smelled like honeysuckle and the sky turned purple, Ash and Willow would come back from hunting. Ash would hunt deer, and Willow would hunt wild trout. They would then sit by the fire pit. They always came back, always, until that night in the fall. A scary fight. It started with a sound like thunder in the distance, even though the sky was clear. It was a deep, vibrating roar that shook the windows of Ellie's shop. He stepped outside and wiped the grease off his hands just in time to see Ash and Willow flying higher than he had ever seen them fly. There was something about how they moved that made them feel anxious and urgent. He yelled, "Where are you to goin'?" But the open air swallowed his voice. They didn't come back within an hour for the first time in years. The sun went down. The pond looked like a field of stars, but the sky above was empty. Eli built a fire and waited, his worry eating away at him like a slow leak in a tire. He climbed to the ridge where they often sat by midnight, when they still hadn't shown up. He put his hands round his mouth and whistled the way they always did. Nothing but silence. Someone at the gate Alohan reached his ears just after sunrise. This time, it was a mechanical sound. Tires on rocks. Ellie's stomach tightened. Not many people ever made it this far up the road. A black SUV with tinted windows came out of the trees. It came to a stop next to his gate. A woman stepped out wearing a forest green jacket with no obvious insignia. She was tall and had sharp eyes. She had a small leather satchel and an air of quiet power. "Mr. Harper." Her voice was calm, but it had a heaviness that made Eli sit up straight. He said, "That's me," carefully. "You are lost." "Not at all." She reached out her hand. "Dr. Eleanor Vigor. I work for the Appalachian Wildlife Conservancy. Can I have a minute?" Eli thought about it before shaking her hand. "Of course. What is this about?" "We've followed a pair of unknown flying creatures to this area," she said. "Big wingspans, thermal signatures that are different from those of any known bird or bat. There have been reports of unusual fire activity in the area." His heart raced. "I can't say I've seen anything like that." She looked at him for a long time, searching. After that, she smiled a little. "If you do, you might want to give us a call. People should understand and protect animals like that." She gave him a card and left. The sound of tires crunching on the road was the only thing that was left. The comeback, Eli walked back and forth along the ridge for the rest of the day. It was evening again, and the smell of rain was heavy in the air. He was about to light a signal fire, which they sometimes did, when a strong gust of wind almost knocked him over. Ash and willow fell in a spiral of green and copper sparks. They hit the ground hard, their chests heaving and their eyes shining with something Eli had never seen before. Excitement mixed with urgency. "Where the hell have you been?" he yelled, both angry and relieved. Willow stepped forward and lowered her head until her molten gaze met his. She let out a cloud of warm mist that smelled a little like ozone and wildflowers. Ash did the same thing, and her wings shook. Then Eli heard it. A low, deep hum that wasn't quite a growl, but more like a deep musical note vibrating through the ground. It pulsed in time with their breathing. He whispered, "What is that?" The dragons looked up at the northern horizon. Beyond the dark hills, faint lights flickered against the clouds. They were strange, amber glows that moved like fireworks. A call that goes beyond words. The same thing happened again and again over the next few weeks. Ash and Willow would fly up into the sky at dusk, going north and sometimes staying away for days. There was a low, harmonic rumble every time they came back, as if they had a message in their bones. Eli started to dream of huge caves lit by rivers of fire and other winged shapes flying round an old mountain. He'd wake up with the taste of smoke in his mouth and the strong feeling that the dragons were inviting him to something bigger, something that was meant for all three of them. One cool October morning, Willow pushed a heavy thing across the barn floor toward him. It was a smooth black stone with gold veins that felt warm to the touch. The humming got louder when Eli held it, and it made his chest vibrate. A map. He could only describe the vision that flashed behind his eyes as a ridge far to the north with a single bright star at the top. Dawn decision, he fought the idea for days. He had a business to run, responsibilities, and a life that was carefully built around keeping things quiet. But the pull was too strong. One morning, as the mist rose from the pond, Ash crouched next to him with her wings folded. Willow sat down next to him. They played a low chord together that sounded like both an invitation and a goodbye. "Okay," Eli said softly, holding the warm stone tightly. "Let's see where you came from." He didn't bring a lot of stuff, just tools, a jacket that would keep him dry, and enough food for a long trip. At dawn, The dragons flew up next to him as he climbed into the ultralight he had been working on for years. The valley below turned into a patchwork quilt of reds and golds in the fall. The northern horizon ahead glowed softly, like the promise of a hidden sun. Eli felt the world crack open with possibility for the first time since that rainy night 17 years ago. The trip north took 2 long days through endless ridges and full forests. Eli flew his ultralight in the early morning light. The hum of the engine mixed with the whoosh of Ash and Willow's strong wings as they flew next to him. He would look to the left or right whenever he started to feel sleepy and see one of them there, their bronze and emerald scales shining against the clouds. It felt like flying inside a promise that was alive. The scenery changed by the second night. Hills turned into jagged cliffs, and a single peak stood out above them all. It was a sharp fang of black rock covered in early snow. Eli could see a faint orange glow breathing at the top, like a coal hidden under ice, even from a long way away. He whispered into the cold wind. "That's it," Ash answered with a low, rumbling trill that shook the ultralight's frame. Willow turned and flew ahead, showing them the way to the mountain that had haunted their dreams. Into the secret gorge as the sun went down. They went down into a narrow gorge that was covered in fog. The air got weirdly warm and smelled like minerals, like hot springs after a storm. Eli parked the ultralight next to some basalt boulders, and then followed the dragons on foot, holding a flashlight in one hand and a black and gold stone in the other. The gorge led to a cave mouth that was 30 feet high, and its arch glowed softly, as if it were lit from inside. The stone in Ellie's hand throbbed like a heartbeat when he walked in. The cave was huge, like a church of fire and shadow. There were natural bridges of obsidian over rivers of molten rock. The stalactites looked like glass. He could feel the deep music in the air more than he could hear it. Then he heard a sound that made him stop. A loud, resonant whoosh of air being pushed aside by huge wings. The old ones from the orange haze, shapes appeared huge, sparkling, and beautiful dragons. There are at least a dozen of them, and their scales come in every color you can think of: sapphire, crimson, silver, and midnight black. Their eyes shone like jewels that were melting. They moved like kings from long ago. One stepped forward, and it was bigger than any animal Eli had ever seen. The head alone could have filled the gouge at home. The cave itself seemed to shake when it spoke. "Child of the Ember, you have brought them back home." The words echoed in English not exactly spoken, but imprinted directly into Ellie's mind. His heart raced as he staggered back. Ash and Willow chirped and bowed down. The old dragon lowered its huge head until Eli could see its golden eyes. "You are the one who kept our family alive when the unworthy wanted to kill them. You have been protecting the last hope of our line for 17 years. Eli gulped down hard. I just found them. Kept them from going in the trash. Everyone would have." The elder's eyes narrowed in a nice way. "Not many would have, and even fewer would keep the secret if the world offered them gold and power for it." The truth uncovered. The elder dragon told the story through pictures and music that didn't need words. Long ago, humans and dragons lived together in a fragile peace. People hunted them out of greed and fear, so the dragons had to hide in secret places. Poachers had taken the last group of eggs. 2 eggs survived the theft, but the thieves threw them away when they ran away from a government raid. They were left to die by the side of the road in the storm. Ellie's chest felt tight. That storm, that night, those eggs were Ash and Willow. The elder said, "Without you, our fire would have gone out. You are their protector, and our connection with people lives on through you." The present the elder brought down its huge claw. In the palm of its hand was a black stone medallion with living gold veins that glowed from the inside. "Accept the ember sigil," the voice said. "It ties you to our family. It gives you access and a spark of the fire that keeps us going." Eli reached out. The medallion was warm at first, then hot, but it didn't burn. When he closed his fingers round it, a sudden wave of heat went through his body. His mind was full of flashes of light and flying high. When it went away, he felt stronger and clearer, like a hidden ember had come to life in his veins. Ash and Willow pressed their heads against his shoulders and rumbled with joy. At a decision, the elder's eyes grew softer. The world outside is changing. Some people still want to destroy things they don't understand, but there may still be others who can learn. Will you help us get across? Eli thought about Cedar Bluff, the quiet nights by the pond, and the friends who didn't know anything. He remembered Dr. Eleanor Vega and how she always asked him careful, probing questions. Could he keep the dragon safe forever by hiding? Or was it time to help them find their place in the world again? Finally, he said in a steady voice, "I'll protect you, but I'll also help other people see the truth, but only carefully. We need to trust each other if we want to live on this planet together." The elder tilted its huge head. "Then the deal is done. A new bond begins." The sky was starting to get lighter by the time they left the cave. Eli felt different. His heart was light and alive, as if the flame on the mountain was beating in time with his own. Ash and Willow flew into the cold dawn, making big, happy circles above the peak. Their fire trails left glowing ribbons in the sky that was getting brighter. Eli got into his ultralight, the ember sigil warm against his chest. The world below him was vast and untamed, a place where dragons still lived and a mechanic from Kentucky had become their protector. As the sun came up, Ash and Willow stood on either side of him, their calls echoing across the mountains like the first notes of a new song. This song promised a time of wonder that neither species could have imagined alone. It felt different to fly back to Kentucky. The same hills and rivers rolled under Ellie's ultralight, but everything was sharper, colors were brighter, and the air was more alive. Ash and Willow flew close together, and their wings sparkled in the early light like banners of molten metal. Every time their wings beat, they matched the ember sigil's new, steady pulse that was warm against Ellie's chest. He kept thinking about what the older dragon had said. "Will you be our bridge?" He didn't make that promise lightly. The world had a way of turning miracles into goals. Coming home, when they got to Cedar Bluff, the sun was low in the sky in late October, making the pond look copper. The valley smelled like wet pine and wood smoke. When Ash and Willow landed, the wind made the water ripple into silver rings. Eli landed a moment later and turned off the ultralight's engine. As the silence settled in, he realized how much he had missed the place, the calmness of the frogs and crickets, and the steady beat of their songs. But things had changed. The ember sigil pulsed weakly against his heart, reminding him that he was now living in two worlds. Dr. Vigor is back. The black SUV came back to the gate 2 days later. Eli wiped his hands on a rag and walked out, his heart racing. Dr. Eleanor Vega got out of the car, and the wind blew her dark hair around. This time she wasn't by herself. A young man in a khaki jacket, who might have been her assistant, followed her with a tablet. "Mr. Harper," she said with a small smile. "I hope I'm not bothering you." Eli said, "You found me again." He spoke in a calm but polite way. "We've been keeping an eye on strange things happening in the air," she said. "Thermal traces that we have never seen before. I thought you might have seen something." Eli looked at her face, which was alert but not threatening. She gave off more of a sense of curiosity than ambition. "Why do you think I would know?" he asked. "Instinct," she said without any other words. "And because you live where the signals meet." He was disarmed by her honesty. A trust test. Eli thought about it while the sigil's warmth stayed steady under his shirt. The elder's words came back. Some people still want to destroy, but some people might still learn. He said carefully, "Dr. Vega, what would you do if you found something unusual, something that could scare people?" She looked him in the eye. Take care of it. Look into it. Help the world understand it without making it a trophy. Her answer put an end to his last doubt. Eli said, "Then maybe it's time you saw something." Her assistant looked up in shock. "Sir, what? You will have to promise not to tell anyone," Eli said next. "This is just between us until we all agree it's safe." Dr. Vega looked at him and then nodded once. "You have my word." The first reveal Eli took them down the narrow path to the pond. The smell of fallen leaves and faint sulfur filled the air in the fall. He softly said, "Shh, Willow," for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then a warm wind blew through the clearing, and two huge shapes came out of the trees, their wings catching the last light of dusk. The assistant gasped and fell back. Dr. Vega stood still, eyes wide, and all took over caution. Ash was the first to land, and his bronze scales shone. Willow came next, her emerald hide shining in the dark. They were interested but calm as they lowered their heads. The helper could hardly talk. "They're real." Dr. Vega slowly stepped forward, her voice a soft whisper. "Wonderful." Eli let out a breath. "Say hello to Ash and Willow. I found them 17 years ago. I've been keeping them safe ever since." The dragons turned their heads to look at the new people with glowing eyes. Willow breathed out a warm breath that made Dr. Vega's hair stand on end. "They're so pretty," she said softly, "and smart." Eli had learned that Ash's low, resonant trail was a greeting. Making plans for the future later, Eli told the story while sitting round a small fire. It was about the stormy night, the hidden valley, the elder dragons, and the ember sigil, which was now faintly glowing under his shirt. Dr. Vega listened carefully, and the light from the fire made her face look thoughtful. "This is bigger than anything I've ever studied," she said in a low voice. "But if the government, businesses, or other people find out too soon, it could be very bad." "That's right," Eli said. "They need safety, not fame." Finally, her assistant spoke up, but his voice was shaky. "What if we make a scientific trust, a foundation that is not public? There is no publicity, just a group of people who can help keep them safe." Dr. Vega nodded. "A small, carefully chosen group. Research on habitats, medical help, and satellite tracking of poachers. No press, no politics." Eli felt a glimmer of hope. That could work, as long as we all keep our word. Ash and Willow stood at the edge of the clearing and listened. Their eyes shone like two suns in the firelight. They seemed to know how important the conversation was. Every now and then, they made a low, harmonious sound that shook the ground like approval. The bond grows stronger, a quiet partnership grew over the next few weeks. Dr. Vega came back alone or with her assistant, and no one knew about it. They put up hidden sensors that looked like fallen logs to keep an eye on the dragon's health and their patterns without bothering them. Eli learned that the ember sigil did more than show that he was a guardian. When he concentrated, he could feel Ash and Willow's moods, a faint echo of their thoughts: hunger, curiosity, and happiness. He could feel their need to find shelter even before the clouds got darker one time when a winter storm came out of nowhere. The dragons also seemed to understand more of what he said, responding with small gestures or melodic hums that had many meanings. Eli sometimes thought about whether the sigil had slowed down his own aging when he was sitting by the fire. He was 50 years old, but he felt stronger than ever, with energy humming like a secret flame. A world that still watches on a cold night. The group was going over sensor data in the barn when Ash let out a low growl that made them go outside. In the distance, headlights moved slowly along the ridge, not fast enough for a car to pass. Eli muttered, "Hunters." Dr. Vega frowned. "Could be nothing, but we can't take any chances." They put out the fire and quietly walked into the woods. They saw two people through the trees with binoculars and a long-lens camera. They were amateur thrill-seekers looking for giant hawks, Eli felt the sigils heat on his chest, which was a warning. He told Ash and Willow to stay out of sight. The intruders finally gave up and drove away after an hour. But the message was clear. Keeping things secret was hard. The promise of tomorrow winter got worse, with cold nights and skies full of stars. Eli often sat between Ash and Willow at the edge of the pond, where the ember sigil made his coat look soft and amber. He thought about the Elder Dragon's order. It wasn't just about keeping secrets to be a bridge. It meant making a future where dragons and people could live together without being afraid. Dr. Vega's foundation started quietly hiring a small group of trusted experts, like ecologists, veterinarians, and even an aerospace engineer who was willing to help with aerial tracking. Everyone had to keep quiet. Every new rival made the weak alliance stronger. One night, as the snowflakes fell like silver ash, Willow put her big head on Ellie's shoulder and let out a deep, melodic hum. He saw pictures of mountains, caves, and people and dragons flying in the open sky, free and without fear. Eli smiled. He whispered, "We'll get there, one careful step at a time." A new day's spring came back with a lot of dogwood flowers. People talked about strange lights that sometimes appeared in the area, but no one could prove anything. Everyone but a few trusted people thought the dragons were real. Ash and Willow took off together one morning as the sun rose over the hills. They spiraled up high until their shapes became streaks of flame against the blue sky. Eli stood on the ridge and watched the ember sigil pulse gently. It was no longer just a gift. It was a constant reminder of the bond that had changed his life. He remembered the night 17 years ago, when he stopped because he saw something move in the rain. A simple act of kindness had taken him from the boring life of a mechanic to the edge of a new age. When the dragons disappeared into the dawn, Eli felt a calm sense of certainty come over him. The truth would come out in the end. When it did, the choices of one stubborn man and the two dragons who called him family would also matter, as would those of all of humanity. He pulled his jacket tighter against the cool wind and walked back to the barn, where friends were waiting and the work of being a guardian was still going on. The ember sigil glowed once, warm and steady, as if to say, "This is just the beginning." That year, spring came late. It was a restless, windy time that smelled like rain and echoed trouble from far away. Eli Harper could tell something was wrong because Ash and Willow moved around nervously at night, their wings rustling as if they were catching whispers on the wind. The ember sigil on his chest throbbed with a nervous heartbeat, making it feel warmer than usual. A sky that shouldn't be burning it began on a Tuesday morning, right after dawn. A loud boom shook the valley while Eli was tightening bolts on the ultralight. He looked up and saw a white streak of fire cutting across the sky, leaving a jagged trail of smoke behind it. It wasn't a meteor or a storm. It was too planned. Ash was the first to go, his bronze wings flashing, and a deep rumble in his throat. Willow came next, and the early sun made her emerald scales shine. They hovered high in the air, like gods watching the sky. A minute later, the black SUV bounced down the gravel road. Dr. Eleanor Vega jumped out before it came to a stop. "You saw it?" she yelled, out of breath. "I heard it," Eli said as he wiped the grease off his hands. "What is it?" "Supposedly a military test flight," she said, squinting at the smoke that was still there. "But the path was wrong, too low and too fast. And it came from the airspace near Fort Braxton that was off limits." Ellie's stomach tightened. It was less than 50 miles to Fort Braxton. "You think they're looking for them?" Vega said in a serious tone. "I think someone has seen what our sensors have been trying to hide. A visitor who wasn't expected that night." While they were talking about their options in the barn, a loud knock came from the front door of the house. Eli and Vega looked at each other warily before Eli opened the door to find a tall man in a dark windbreaker with a badge on his belt. "Mr. Harper," the man said, "I'm Agent Thomas Avery from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service." He sounded friendly enough, but his eyes kept moving past Eli and into the darkening valley. "Evening," Eli said in a calm voice. "Can I help you with something? We've heard reports of strange animal behavior, including large birds that could be a threat to aviation safety. Do you mind if I ask a few questions?" Vega stepped forward behind him, calm but strong. "Agent, I'm Dr. Eleanor Vega from the Appalachian Wildlife Conservancy. We keep an eye on migratory animals here. I can promise you that nothing is dangerous to aviation." Avery looked at both of them for a moment. "Please call me if you see anything strange." He gave Eli a card. The embossed seal wasn't the usual one for a fish and wildlife. Vega let out a sigh of relief when Avery's truck finally drove away. That badge wasn't for fish and wildlife. It was the Department of Defense. Getting ready for trouble over the next week, helicopters that flew low started to show up at strange times and thud across the night sky. Eli added more heat-dampening panels to the hangar's roof and made it stronger so that the dragon's signatures would be harder to see. Ash and Willow stayed close to each other, and their usual carefree flights turned into careful circles. Even though things were tense, there were times of quiet awe. One evening, as rain fell on the pond, Willow rested her huge head on Ellie's lap and hummed softly. The ember sigil got warmer, and for a moment he could feel her thought as clearly as his own. "We believe in you." It was so simple that it made his throat hurt. A dangerous plan. Dr. Vega showed up late one night with a tough laptop and a look of determination. "They're triangulating thermal spikes," she said. "I think they've limited the search to a 10-mile area. We can't just stay hidden forever." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" "Moving for now," she said. "I know of a chain of abandoned mines in the Smokies that are deep, stable, and naturally warm. We take Ash and Willow there until the heat goes down." Eli thought about the mountains, how dangerous it would be to move such big animals while being watched, and how easy it would be for pursuers to find them. Ash rumbled low, as if he could tell he was hesitating. Willow made a soft trail, which could mean yes or go ahead. "Okay," Eli finally said. "We leave at dawn. The journey starts." The valley was buzzing with quiet purpose before dawn. Eli locked up the gear in the ultralight while Vega and her assistant looked at satellite feeds. Ash crouched down, his muscles tensed, and Willow stretched her wings, making a soft metallic sound. As Eli whispered, "Stay low, stay quiet," the umber sigil burned warmly against his chest. They took off into the foggy sky and flew southeast toward the Smokies. They flew over quilted farmland and shadowy ridges for us, while the world below was still asleep. But as the sun rose, Eli saw a distant flash of light, 3 dots moving quickly and getting closer. "Choppers," Vega's voice crackled over the radio. The helicopters were black and had matte finishes. Their rotors made a loud noise as they flew. They turned toward the dragons with military precision. "Get out of formation," Eli yelled. Ash and Willow split up and dove into different cloud banks. Eli banked hard, using the sun's glare to hide his ultralight. The bigger target, Ash, was followed by the choppers. A loud roar came from Ash, and a flash of bronze fire lit up the sky. The helicopters shook, surprised but still going. Willow swooped back, cutting through the clouds to get next to her brother. Together, they let out a blinding flare of heat. It wasn't an attack, but a shimmering wall of rising air that hit the helicopters like a sudden storm. "Go, Smokies," Eli yelled. The dragons disappeared into a thick wall of cumulus clouds with one last burst of speed, leaving the helicopters circling without a purpose. Save for an hour, they got to a secluded gorge deep in the Smokies by nightfall. The mine that Vega had promised would be open looked like a blackmouth under tall pines. They were met with warm mineral air inside. The dragons settled down, and their wings made a noise like silk ribbing. Eli touched the rough rock and let out a long breath. Vega said quietly, We bought some time, but they won't stop. Eli looked at Ash and Willow, whose eyes glowed softly in the light of the lantern. He could feel the ember sigil pulse, his steady, silent beat of determination. They will have to, he said. Next time, we won't just hide. Ash made a low, approving sound that was echoed by Willow's soft hum. The sound of all of them together filled the cave, a deep harmony that made Ellie's bones vibrate. The call of the ember Eli sat by the cave entrance that night, watching the sky without the moon. The sigil got warmer and shone through his shirt. He shut his eyes and felt it speak to him, not in words but in a rush of purpose. Guardians don't last forever. They get up. Eli opened his eyes to the dark and knew what he had to do next. Not just protect, but also stand. The Smoky Mountains kept their secrets well, but by the third week, the quiet started to feel like a trap. Eli Harper could feel it in the air, a heavy, waiting quiet that pressed against his skin. Willow and Ash felt it too. Their wings moved while they slept, and the tiniest noise woke them up. The ember sigil burned hotter every night, reminding me that hiding was only putting off the inevitable. A light in the dark, a weak mechanical thrum rolled through the cave like distant thunder just after midnight. Eli woke up with a start. Dr. Eleanor Vega was already at the door with her field scope. Thermal drones, she said quietly as she moved the lens. 3, no, 5, moving in a group. They found us, Eli said in a low but steady voice. Vega nodded sadly. The mines are protected, but not from a full scan. We can't wait. Ash raised his huge head behind them, and his molten eyes shone. Willow stood up next to him, her tail curling protectively round her brother. They know, Eli said softly to the dragons. It's time. A plan of desperation. They stood round a boulder with an old map on it. Vega ran a finger along a thin blue line that marked an old logging road that led to a high plateau. Here, she said, if we can get them in the air from this ridge before the sun comes up, the difference in temperature between the ground and the air might hide their heat signature. We aim south, across state lines, and what if the drones catch up? Vega looked him in the eye. Then we make them feel bad about it, Ash rumbled, making a deep vibration that shook the floor of the cave. Willow's trill was sharper, like a bell ringing with determination. Eli felt the sigil's heat rise, spreading up his chest like a stream of fire. It wasn't just a warning, it was a call. The march at night they moved in the dark, with Vega leading with a flashlight with a red filter and Eli following behind. Even though they were big, Ash and Willow moved quietly, their scales glinting in the starlight. The sound of drones buzzing got louder above, as a mechanical swarm looked for something on the mountain. Every time a twig broke, adrenaline shot through my body. But the dragon's calm presence helped Eli stay calm. They weren't scared hatchlings anymore. They were protectors. The logging road stopped at a plateau that was windy. Beyond was a huge drop into dark valleys, and to the south was the faint glow of a town far away. Vega said, "This is it." First contact, a sudden spotlight cut through the trees, making everything white. 3 military helicopters flew over the ridge, their rotors screaming. "Stand down," their loudspeakers yelled. "This is airspace that isn't open to the public." Ellie's heart raced. He moved forward with his hands up. He yelled, "We're leaving." And the wind carried his voice. "No one has to get hurt." There was a voice coming from a loudspeaker. "Give up the creatures. The United States government owns them." Ash let out a low, loud growl that shook loose stones down the slope. "They don't belong to anyone," Eli said through gritted teeth. The dragons stand the helicopters moved forward, and armed soldiers came out of the side doors. The sigil felt like a living flame against Ellie's chest. He put his hand on it without thinking. He felt a rush of warmth and could hear Ash and Willow's thoughts as clearly as speech, all together. Ash jumped first, and the sound of her wings snapping open was like thunder. Willow followed, and her green scales caught the searchlights in a flash that blinded everyone. They let out a coordinated roar that echoed through the mountains and shook them. The lead helicopter shook violently, and the downdraft went crazy. Another one turned away, with instruments blowing. "Go!" Vega yelled over the noise. Now, fire in the air. Eli jumped into the ultralight, which was already humming. Ash and Willow swept low, making a wind vortex that protected the craft as it took off into the sky before dawn. The helicopters came back together and chased hard. The tracer rounds flew through the air like meteors, but the dragons twisted and rolled with impossible speed. Ash blew out a cone of superheated air. It wasn't a killing flame. It was a shimmering curtain of thermal distortion. The sensors on the helicopter screamed, and their targeting systems went dark. Willow spiraled up, making the last helicopter climb steeply. Then a dove in a sudden corkscrew that sent it off course. The sky was on fire as the sun rose, turning everything gold and red. The strength of the ember, the sigil on Ellie's chest, pulsed so strongly that it felt like it was alive as the last helicopter tried to land. A wave of energy burst outward. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it like thunder. The air crackled, and the rotor watch stopped. All three helicopters had problems. Their engines were choking and their instruments were flickering. They went down in altitude, like hurt birds flying away. Ash and Willow hovered in the morning light, their wings shining. For a moment, they looked bigger than life, like the fire and sky of old. The sigil cooled down after it had done its job. A choice that isn't scary. They flew south until the mountains turned into rolling hills. Finally, Eli gave the signal to land near a quiet bend in the river. Vega landed next to him, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She asked, "Did you feel that?" Eli nodded his head slowly. "Not just me. It was them. And something that is older. More." Willow walked over and lowered her head until her eyes met Ellie's. A clear thought echoed in his mind. No cost. He got it. It was never about staying hidden forever. It was about giving them the chance to live how they wanted. Letting go for 2 more days, they traveled deeper into the wild, where no drone could easily follow. Finally, they got to a hidden valley that was always covered in mist and had cliffs and waterfalls that made it a natural fortress. "This is the place," Vega said in a low voice. It seemed like Ash and Willow did too. They flew in circles high above before landing next to the lake, where their reflections rippled in the water. Eli came closer, his heart heavy and full at the same time. He said softly, "You're safe here. You don't need me anymore." Willow nuzzled his shoulder, and her warm breath felt good on him. Ash put his huge head softly on Ellie's chest, right over the sigil. The pendant got warm and cool, leaving a pulse that felt like a goodbye. After 17 years, the years that came after went by like a dream. Eli went back to Cedar Bluff and reopened the old gush. He lived simply, but never forgot the bond. Vega kept looking into things, always being careful to keep the valley a secret. Eli was fixing a truck on a cool fall morning, exactly 17 years after he first found them. A dark shadow passed overhead. He went outside and covered his eyes. 2 huge shapes moved across the blue sky, their scales shining like sunlight on water. Willow and Ash, but they weren't the only ones. 3 smaller figures followed them. They were sleek, bright, and clearly young. Ellie's breath stopped. The amber sigil warmed against his chest as the dragons flew in a graceful lock over the gouge. Willow let out a loud cry that sounded like a celebration and recognition. Ash followed with a roar that echoed through the valley. Eli laughed, and it sounded full of awe. He whispered, "Welcome home." The ember's legacy. The young dragons flew in circles above, playing and not being afraid. Ash and Willow flew round again, and then stopped, their eyes meeting Ellie's across the wide sky. The sigil glowed softly, confirming everything they had talked about. They were still alive. They had done well, and their kind would be free to live on. Eli didn't feel sad when the 5 dragons flew away into the clouds. Just a deep sense of peace. The flame of the ember would never go out. It had been passed down from one guardian to the next, as promised. And in the stillness that followed, the world seemed wide open and full of potential.